Alrighty, in this video I'm going to be ranking every NFL stadium from worst to best. This is a video that I've really wanted to make for a long time. Thought about doing it last year, it was too close to the end of the year. So as the new year starts, as we're in the month of January, I'm going to break these down. I like my list, I've studied it for a while, and I'm excited to get right on into it. And we're going to start with number 30, and it's the Commander Stadium, Northwest Stadium. Not a lot to like about this stadium. Just looks out of date completely. There's no uniqueness to it at all. Just a really outdated stadium. And I believe with the new ownership group, they have plans to put a new one in place. But for the time being, it's just not, it doesn't stack up with the other stadiums. If you look at it, there's the aerial shot right there. Not that great of a stadium that we have there. Moving on to number 29, we have Everbank Stadium. This is another stadium that is getting a renovation. I believe it's like $1 billion renovation or something like that. So they're getting it to them. This is another stadium where, yeah, there's just not a lot to it if you look at it. And yeah, the renovation is going to be something that they're really going to need. The exterior, I don't even like the exterior with it. Not a lot going on there positively, so that's why it's at 29 on the list. Moving to 28, we have Highmark Stadium, home of the Buffalo Bills, and this is another stadium that's due to get demolished soon. Obviously, the Bills are building their new current stadium that I believe is going to open next year. And wow, do they really need this? This looks like a lower tier college stadium in my mind. Just not a lot going on with it. They get a decent crowd, obviously, good fan base, but that new stadium still going to be an outdoor stadium. I think they're going to really like that new one. Moving on to 27, we have Bank of America Stadium. It's home of the Panthers. And the reason I have it so low is just where's the uniqueness to it? There's no uniqueness to it at all. It's literally just a bowl. And if you're not going to put that much uniqueness into the stadium, like this could be anybody's stadium. There's no sign that there's anything wild in it. 3-row classic seating, not a lot that I like about it, and that's why it's so low on this list. I think they need to do some sort of renovation to make it a little bit more unique. Moving on to 26, we have Soldier Field, and a lot of this is because I don't like the new renovation that they did. Not sure what year they did it, but that arch there, it just doesn't look right. They also have plans. Nothing has been official, but they have plans of a new stadium at some point. It's just a very poorly reviewed stadium. That arch, it just doesn't look right, in my opinion. I know what they want to keep it at Classic Soldier Field, but I would highly recommend them probably moving it. Makes the most sense. Moving on to 25, you have Nissan Stadium, home of the Tennessee Titans. And I don't mind this stadium. It was built, I believe, in the 90s. They are getting a new stadium as well. They have a really nice dome that they're building. I think they're going to host a Super Bowl in like 5 to 10 years. But yeah, there's just nothing really crazy about this. I do like the big upper deck. I think it's unique, but there's just nothing that great about this stadium, and it's a good thing that they're upgrading. Moving on to 24, we have Paycor Stadium. And it's got a cool exterior. I will say that. It's got a cool exterior. It's got that portion of just seats with it. It's not a horrible stadium by any means necessary. They are going to do a huge renovation, I believe, in Cincinnati. So yeah, it's not a terrible stadium. It outlooks that lake. But when it just stacked up against the other ones, it does not compete as well. And that's why it's as high as it is on the list. Moving on to 23, we have Huntington Stadium, recently renamed, home of the Cleveland Browns. And yeah, between the Bengals and this, it was kind of a toss-up. I think they do have unique elements, though. They have the dog pound in this stadium, which is a big row of seating. They had a recent renovation that really helped the stadium, and it overlooks Lake Erie, and Lake Erie is just a massive lake. And that really just gives a boost to the stadium, I think. New Jumbotron there, but if you look, there's the dog pound. I think it helps it out, and that's why it's where it is. Moving on to number 22, we have Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Miami Dolphins. And this is a stadium that went through a renovation. Before, it didn't have the rooftop on it. They gave it there because of the Florida climate. There's just been really poor reviews with this stadium. It's hosted a lot of big games, like national championship games, Super Bowls, but there's just not a lot of positive feedback that I've seen from it, and apparently it's very dated. So I would look to Miami getting a new stadium at some point because it's just got very poor reviews. Moving on to 21, you have Gillette Stadium, a somewhat newer stadium that they've put together. Obviously, it's been the stadium they had when the Patriots went on their dynasty stretch. And, I think for an outdoor stadium, it's in pretty nice condition. Obviously, it's newer. They have a decent brick exterior that I do like. The Jumbotron's decent size. So, it's one of those stadiums that is fine, but it's not in any sort of elite status, in my opinion. Going to 20, we have Levi's Stadium, home of the 49ers. It's a newer built stadium, and I think the reason that I would put pushback on it is it looks a little too much like a baseball stadium to me from the exterior, and I think that's the big reason I don't like the exterior. It's a newer stadium, and there might be people that have this higher on their list. There's not a lot that I like about it. I believe it hosted Super Bowl 50, newer stadium. I don't like the exterior. That's why it's where it is on the list. Going to 19, we have MetLife Stadium, home of the Jets and the Giants. And this is actually one of the bigger stadiums in the NFL. It's located, and a lot of it is why it's so where it is on this list is location. Obviously, it's in East Rutherford, New Jersey. And they can't really put it in New York, which makes sense. But I think they should have went with a dome. I think this was a poor choice to do this. They did host a Super Bowl between the Seahawks and Broncos years ago, and it was a cold one. But, just not a lot with this. Moving on to 18, we have Raymond James Stadium, home of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think this stadium has some unique qualities to it. Like right there you see the pirate ship. And I always thought, when I was growing up, I thought that was a pretty cool feature that they had there. So they have a uniqueness to it. I understand why it's outside because that nice Florida weather makes sense. I like this stadium just because there's a few unique elements. You can tell it apart from the others, and that's why it's where it is on the list. Moving on, we have at 17, Lincoln Financial Field, home of the Philadelphia Eagles. And this stadium really draws in a good crowd when the Eagles play, and I think it's pretty well designed. I think it's pretty well designed through and through for an outdoor stadium that's not a super stadium. I think it fits the NFL model. Like, if you look at that shot in the dark with the lighting, nice exterior, it just looks fit to be a pretty solid stadium. That's why it stands where it stands on the list. Moving to 16, we have State Farm Stadium, home of the Arizona Cardinals. And this has hosted a bunch of games, a lot of Super Bowls. It is a super stadium, was one of the early super stadiums. The reason it stands where it stands on the list is because it just doesn't have that nice of quality that some of the other super stadiums have. I always thought this was kind of an overrated super stadium, but it's got a retractable roof. It's hosted big games. Still, by all means, a really solid stadium. And as we move to 15, we have another super stadium, the Caesars Superdome, home of the New Orleans Saints. And the problem with this stadium, and it looks really nice inside, it's been rebranded a few times. It's just the age of it. Really, really old stadium, was built a long time ago. Obviously, it's gone through some renovations for sure, which helped. It's hosted some big games, but it is kind of aged. There's parts of the stadium that are somewhat dated, and that's why it stands where it stands on this list, because we're getting into some of the good stadiums, and that's why it stands there. Moving on to 14, we have M&T Bank Stadium, home of the Ravens. And the Ravens have drawn really good crowds to the stadium, and I think there's a uniqueness to it. The purple seating, really like the purple seating, and they really use their colors to their advantage when they do this. and the Jumbotron is well centered. I think that the sides of the stadium are well put together as well. Overall, really like this stadium, and the exterior has a nice brick that I've always liked. Moving on to 13, we have Ford Field, home to the Detroit Lions. And this is another one of those stadiums, hosted a Super Bowl, indoor dome. I think where it really gets points deducted from is it doesn't have that key Jumbotron in it. I think if they had that, this could be a really, really solid stadium that would probably be in the top 10. But I got to put it there. But if you look, the exterior, really nice brick design. And I think stadiums with brick on the outside, it costs a little bit more to do, but I think it's a really nice feature. And that's why I got to put it there. Moving on to 12, Equalizer Stadium, home of the Steelers. And it's just a classic stadium. Really has a nice look to it. Overlooks the lake, obviously. And I just think there's a lot of good things going on with this stadium. Fits the Steelers brand. It's really unique. I like the yellow seating as well. Fits their brand in Pittsburgh really, really well. And that's why I think it's got to be high on this list, just because of the big games, the way they play there. Moving on to 11, we have NRG Stadium, home of the Texans, another indoor dome stadium that has hosted some big games in the past. Obviously, there's a picture of the Super Bowl that they hosted, and they hosted the national championship game last year. Nice stadium, really big. They have some decent Jumbotrons. Obviously, the retractable roof is a really nice feature. When it's not retracted, you have the natural lighting coming in. It goes up, it extends up as a stadium. I think it's a really solid one. There's just a lot of good ones, so that's why it's at where it's at on this list. Moving on to the top 10, we have Empower Field, home of the Broncos. And I like this stadium a lot. I think it has good uniqueness. The seating, obviously, the blue, nice seating. You know exactly from the start when you look at it whose stadium it is. You have a really unique piece where you actually have the Bronco that you'll see here in a second just overlooking the stadium. When you have cool little things like that, you get extra points for me with stadiums, and that's why it's going to be at 10, just because of the uniqueness. I like the outdoor design. Good stadium. Going on to 9, we have Arrowhead Stadium, home of the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a stadium that has been in some big-time atmospheres recently, and I think the way that it's designed with its kind of curved inward shape is why it's been one of the loudest stadiums. I think they clocked it at one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL. And I think the reason for that is due to the design and the way that it's set up and how it's been put together. And the red seating is really nice too. There's a lot to like about this stadium, and that's why it lands on this list. Going on to number 8, we have the most historic stadium in the NFL. This is a landmark stadium, one of the most well-known stadiums in the entire NFL overall, and probably in the entire country within all the major sports, is Lambeau Field. They had a recent renovation which added those 2 upper decks there. It's just a really historic stadium. I like the exterior. I thought the renovation they did was really good. You have the Lambeau Leap within the stadium that has been trademarked. There's just a lot of history in this stadium, oldest stadium in the NFL. That's why it lands where it lands. Moving on to 7, we have Lucas Oil Stadium. This is really a gem of a stadium. The exterior is incredible. The interior, obviously, the retractable roof is a really, really key feature, and this was built somewhat recently. An absolute super stadium, hosts events like the Big Ten Championship game. Really, really solid stadium through and through. And if you look at the aerial shot, you just see how massive this stadium is, and it's one of the best, and it's one of the best in the country. Certainly has a really good floor as well. Moving on to 6, we have Allegiant Stadium, home of the Raiders, Las Vegas' stadium. Really, really solid production. I don't love the roof. I wish it was retractable, but obviously it's so hot in Nevada, in Vegas, that they just weren't able to do that. But it's designed really well. The concourse is unbelievable, really nice quality through and through. And you have that Al Davis torch in the middle there, which is so unique to them. A feature, you have a little bit of the natural lighting there. This is just really a gem of a stadium that I'm glad that the NFL built recently. Moving on to 5, AT&T Stadium, home of the Dallas Cowboys. This is like the original super stadium. This is kind of the trend that started them all. And there's the big key right there, that Jumbotron. That's what really separates it from other stadiums within the NFL, within all stadiums in the country pretty much. Nobody has a Jumbotron that size. I don't even know how much that would cost, but really, really nice. And then you just look at the design, crazy amounts of seating through and through. Jerry's World. It's a really solid stadium. Has hosted some of the biggest events, and that's why it lands where it lands on the list. Moving on to number 4, we have Lumen Field, home of the Seattle Seahawks, and this is purely due to the uniqueness. That corner right there with the weird seating and the way it's arched, kind of like a soccer stadium, to produce high noise. It's just really, really cool design that is just so unique to that team. I mean, there's never going to be another stadium like it, and I think that's why you got to put it higher on this list. It's just so unique. The lighting right there, I mean, that looks incredible if you look at it, and that's why Lumen Field has to be one of the best. Moving on to number 3, we have Mercedes-Benz Stadium, a recently built stadium by the Atlanta Falcons, and this thing is just one of the nicest stadiums that I've seen built. If you look at the way they have that design, I like the Jumbotron design because that allows pretty much wherever you're sitting in the stadium, you're going to get a good visual of that Jumbotron. And if you look at that roof up there, it's retractable. Fully retractable roof probably costs an unbelievable amount of money, but it's a crazy good feature. And I really like the way that this stadium was designed. But if we move on to number 2, we have US Bank Stadium, home of the Minnesota Vikings. I was really tempted to put this at number 1. Look at the natural lighting. Look at the design. Look at how it kind of looks like a Viking ship with that arch. The inside is incredible. And the natural lighting, the way it looks, the way it's shaped. Whoever the designer is of this stadium, like, look at that. Whoever the designer is of this stadium is truly one of the best. And it's just put together so well with all the natural lighting. And that's why it has to be high up on this list. Just an unbelievable, remarkable stadium. But moving on to number 1, what other than SoFi Stadium, home of the Rams and the Chargers? This is a masterpiece. I mean, just look at that shot right there of the water, the pillars, all of it together. Was just a really well-crafted stadium. They had a vision. I remember when I saw the renderings for this, I didn't think they'd be able to put it together, and they did. I like the Jumbotron. It's another one of those where probably the second best to the Dallas, where you can see it, the same angle of it from every seat that you're in. Just really well done, really well put together. But that's going to do it for the list. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, this is the number 1.